Hello, YouTube friends. Ben Ochart here. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I just got back from a vacation down what is called the Natchez Trace. Natchez Trace. If you're ever in the Tennessee or Mississippi area, up in the upper corner of Alabama, check out the Natchez Trace. Beautiful, beautiful drive. One of probably the best drives of probably my entire life. But I certainly recommend it if you're in the area. At any rate, I had my tanks taken care of by my daughter. And she did a great job. She even created a reminder on the project board that I keep here in the fish room, so that she would get it right. And she did. She got it right. But for some reason, there was a large algae bloom in the tanks while I was gone, as you can see right here. A lot of the brown algae. Now, I want to be very clear about something. I don't consider algae necessarily a bad thing. The truth is that algae is a sign that you have a living ecosystem, that things are happening. There's life in the tank. There's some folks out there actually that don't consider a tank actually cycled until they see some algae, until they see some signs of life being generated in the tank, starting to take hold in the tank. And so a tank that is seasoned or stable is always going to have signs of algae, brown and green algae, and sometimes even that nasty black hair algae. But there are reasons for it, and certainly my suspicion is that when I'm here, usually what I do is I run the tanks on the blue light, which isn't a full spectrum light and doesn't promote algae growth. So I run the blue light except for the times that I'm actually viewing the tank. So I'll leave the blue light on, the timers will turn the tanks on, turn them off, and then when I come down and actually I'm viewing the tanks, I'll turn the actual full spectrum lights on. And but for the sake of simplicity, because whenever I have anyone taking care of my tanks, I leave the absolute most simple instructions possible. And I just left. I didn't want her messing with any of the lights, so I just left it on the regular full spectrum light. So when she'd come down to feed, the tanks were just lit and ready to go. So I think that extra full spectrum light promoted the algae bloom that occurred in my tanks. I certainly have a window here in the garage, and it lets through some heavily filtered light that happens to get through some of the slots in the blinds. I don't think that's enough to actually create the kind of algae bloom that I see. So I think it's because there was too much light compared to how light normally is. So now what I have to do is I have to get into the tanks and do a bit of a scrub down. Now, something that was pointed out a while back in a video by Corey over at the Aquarium Co-op is that if you have a tremendous amount of algae in your tank, keep in mind that algae is helping to consume the nitrates. That is actually, the nitrates are actually keeping it alive. So another thing to consider is, were they getting too much food while I was gone? Was that contributing to more ammonia production and, of course, ultimately more nitrates? I don't think so, because she fed them in a very measured method that we actually went over together and practiced before I left. So I think what we're really dealing with here is the fact that the tanks got more light than they normally get. Now, the thing that Corey mentioned in that video that I alluded to a second ago is that if you have a lot of algae in a tank and you suddenly eliminate all of the algae, you could conceivably have a spike in nitrates, because that algae was consuming nitrates. So one of the things you can do, of course, is eliminate it in steps. And I'm going to be, of course, doing the front panels. I'll be cleaning off, wiping off the front panels and the plants and the rockwork. I'll leave the back. I leave the back alone. Let that algae live and let it go ahead and keep consuming and helping me with nitrates. And I'll also do a water change. A water change will reduce nitrates, and that will help as well. Another factor to consider is phosphates. Sometimes phosphates, especially if you have blue-green algae, which is not really an algae but something else, but if you have a blue-green looking, what people call blue-green algae, you probably have a phosphate issue. There are some things that you can buy that can reduce phosphates. You can also, there's some pads like this one, again from the Aquarium Co-op. The aquariumcoop.com. This is a phosphate pad that you cut and drop into your filter, and it helps to absorb phosphates, and that can also help, especially if you're having a bit of that blue-green algae, because and the brown algae as well, because they like those phosphates. Okay, so at any rate, I just thought I'd share with you that this kind of algae bloom can occur. It can occur very quickly. I was gone for 5 days, and over a 5-day period, it went from a pretty pristine situation, because I left the tanks in very good shape, to a pretty brown, a lot of brown on the glass, a lot of brown on the plants, and so I've got some work to do. So I'm going to go ahead and jump on that. And just remember, if you're running into something like this, there could be a variety of factors. One is, of course, you might be feeding too much. Also, watch the light, the amount of light. Are you providing too much sunlight, too much full spectrum lighting, as in the case of these? These are Beamswork full spectrum LEDs, ideal for a planted tank, and of course, also ideal for algae. So, and also keep in mind, don't panic when you see algae. Consider it a good sign of a healthy system that is becoming seasoned and is becoming, it's becoming a live, vibrant ecosystem, and realize that it is helping you with nitrates to some degree. Now, if you want to get a controlled nitrate production, go onto my playlist, and I'll put a link up here somewhere. I'll put a link to a playlist on how to control algae with a thing called an algae scrubber, something that I get from a place called Santa Monica Filtration. You can also DIY algae scrubbers, and they actually provide you with a way of using the proper light frequency to generate algae within a controlled space. So you're in this controlled space, you generate the algae in there, and then you can harvest the algae to feed it to your fish, because it's very nutritious. And because it's consuming all the nutrients within that controlled space, there isn't much nutrient for algae to grow anywhere else in the tank. And so it controls the algae within a small black box. This is an example of an algae scrubber. And what it has is it has a surface that is ideal for algae to attach to. And then it has an ideal light frequency. An ideal light frequency for algae to grow. And then it has a very powerful magnet that allows it to stay attached to the glass naturally, with this part inside the tank and this part outside the tank. As you can see, very strong magnet. And then there's an airline so that oxygen is coming through this, so you'll end up with a bubbler inside your tank, and that oxygen is helping the algae to become nice and rich and green and nutritious, and the fish love it. So this is one way to control algae as well, something to consider, certainly if you have a bigger tank. And this is a small unit. This is one of the smallest units available. This type of method of controlling algae has been in use in the saltwater community for quite some time. Okay, so I've got some work to do. I hope to see you on Saturday at the Cichlids and Coffee live stream. Just got a bunch of stickers in, some of the Cichlids and Coffee stickers. I'll be giving some of those away, and also got another cool sticker. Look at this guy. We'll give some of those away on Saturday too, as well as the usual, the one from Vinny, the new design from Vinny. We'll give some of those away too, all right? So thank you for tuning in. Just thought I'd share with you a little bit of what happened while I was away to the tanks in the form of algae. If you have a sudden algae bloom, look at how much you're feeding, look at light, and go ahead and clean it off. But if you have a real large bloom, you may want to consider cleaning it up in stages, so that you don't risk, as I mentioned earlier, brought up by Corey, somebody who I trust, Corey at the Aquarium Co-op, don't risk a spike in nitrates, because that algae has been helping to control the nitrates. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you so much. Hope to see you on Saturday at 11 a.m. Central for Cichlids and Coffee. All right, bye-bye.